This is Dr. Steve Sears, and welcome back to Heal the Burn. My guest today is someone I respect enormously. This is Dr. Bud Isaacson. He is a primary care physician and the executive dean at the Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine of Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine here in Cleveland. But this time, he actually asked if he could interview me. He wanted to explore my own journey, how I got into medicine, what led to my own burnout, and how I found my way to where I am now, still practicing, still in the system, still churning, but in a very different relationship to it than I had even 4 years ago. So today, we're not on a video call. We're actually in the same room, sharing the same space. We only have a few notes in front of us, and we're going to let this be a real conversation, part interview, part coaching session, part, whatever happens. Today, you've turned this back on me, so I'm handing the mic over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Steve. Delighted to be here. And I have to say, just having the privilege of being in space together is great. Just tell me a little bit about the environment and what that means to you in terms of your practice. This is your professional home.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time here, and I think that it can be a little bit depressing if it doesn't look like a place I want to be. I realized a few years ago that fluorescent lights really burn on my head and don't make me feel cozy. So I've picked up a couple of lights that are they're LED or not halogen, but they cast a light like an old-fashioned incandescent bulb. And I feel like that helps to keep me sort of calm, sane. I wish I could do that in the rooms. We do have policies about that. And you can't examine somebody in yellow light. You have to see them.
Exactly. Well, when I came in here, it felt like a very comfortable space. And I couldn't help but notice that you actually had created space for your trainees too, which I think says something about you that's important to you.
Yeah, one of the things that really encouraged me to join this place was the teaching opportunities. And when I first started, I noticed that the residents, they stand in the hall. and I felt like that was disconnected. And I really wanted to make a space for them that gave them the impression that you could actually do this job and make it comfortable, make it a place that you don't mind going, and make it a place where we can do learning. So we have whiteboard over there, and we'll do differential diagnosis and stuff. But they all know that they're welcome to sit here, and it's funny, they end up sitting here when my other partners are precepting.
Yeah.
Just because there's not a specific spot for them.
Well, I think it shows them a lot of respect that you're treating them as professionals. So that's great.
Thanks.
I do want to hear about your journey into medicine, how you got interested and what that was like.
I was always thinking I would be a doctor because my dad was a doctor and my big brother was a doctor and my mom was a nurse. And I remember talking about that from when I was a little kid, but I really didn't think that I knew why. And I thought about medicine all the way up to I went to college, and I sort of tried to start a pre-med track. And I was probably like 2 years in before I decided that I wasn't sure I enjoyed school as much as I thought I would. I had a lot more fun with my friends, and it felt a little drudgery for me. One of the science classes, the organic chemistry, actually kicked my butt, and I just decided I should do something else.
Wow.
And I actually transferred to the School of Journalism. Wow. And got my degree in journalism, in advertising, and worked actually in advertising for a couple of years. At the time, this was like early 1990s. The economy wasn't strong, so most of our friends who were working were getting laid off or having trouble finding jobs in their career. I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time, and it was spring break of '93, I believe. and we woke up at 6 a.m. to a huge earthquake. And, you know, although there are earthquakes in Portland, it's not something that we're used to. And we were living in this loft apartment that had huge 16-foot ceilings, and it was just a concrete slab on columns. And I just remember the building swaying and thinking, wow, that could squish me. That could just squish us right now. Didn't squish us, so that's good. It started some gears turning about what I wanted to do with my life that felt more important than having a job in advertising where, you know, basically I was selling people air time. It didn't feel important. I wasn't sure if I could do it because, you know, I didn't end up with the super best grades because I was just trying to get out of college. And what happened was a uncle passed away, and there was some money for each of us. And I thought, well, what if I went back to school, you know, fixed up my grades and thought maybe I could go to medical school. We'll see. And I met with an advisor at Portland State University, and he was this grizzled old guy with crazy, like, Einstein hair in an office that had books all around it. It was lying and papers stacked everywhere. And I was really nervous. I thought he'd be like, dude, what are you thinking? You can't come back to this. So he didn't say that. He said, what you need to do is follow your bliss. And I didn't really quite understand what that meant, but I took it as a you should try. I enrolled back in a post-baccalaureate program to do organic chemistry and all the chemistries and all the other things that I hadn't done, and I was doing really well in them. And started working in a lab, doing all the things that you used to do to get into medical school. And I studied hard for the MCATs. I did well on those. And I remember talking along the way to somebody who was a medical resident, I think. And he told me, he said that his mindset when he was applying to medical school was, he said to me, if I could get an interview, I could get in, is what he said. And I thought that was kind of cool, because on paper, what do we look like? We all look the same. We're all,
right,
you know, statistics or grades. And so I put in my head this theorem that if I can get an interview, I can get in. And I applied to a bunch of schools, and I applied to Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia, and lo and behold, I got an interview, and I got in. And it was such a marvel to me that I was able to go from kind of crappy student burned out on school to medical school, and it felt really, really great. And I think another thing that helped me move toward this was that I was 26 at the time, and I had a little bit better sense about what it is that I wanted to do with my time on the planet.
That's a great story, Steve. And what I hear in that is looking for meaning, looking for a meaningful career. Sort of alluded to the fact that you're where you were at early in your post-college life wasn't really as meaningful as you had hoped,
Mm-hmm.
and also a level of maturity and really sort of with a focus going after the pre-med and really nailing it, you know, as opposed to sort of following it because you thought you had to at the beginning.
I'd say it felt like a fit. It felt like something I could see myself doing.
So it sounds like when you got to Jefferson, you were very excited to be there, and then I know you went on to become an internal medicine resident and an internist.
Yes.
And you practiced near your home, right?
Yeah, actually, we moved back to Portland, where I am from, and I had essentially worked in the same place from the year 2000 until 2023.
So I want to talk to you a little bit because we're sitting here in Cleveland, Ohio, and something happened, right, to get you from Portland to Cleveland. So I'm curious. Tell me about that
Sure.
phase of your life.
Sure. You'll remember the COVID pandemic.
Of course.
It really upended things in clinical practice in a lot of ways. There was so much unknown and so much bad information, and so scary how many people were sick, how many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people were dying. What I found was I was really overwhelmed with having to explain my position to patients who might not have been on board with taking care of, group immunology. They didn't want vaccines, and arguing about the severity of it when literally hundreds of my patients had died. And that definitely kind of changed my feeling about if I'm here for the society, what if they're not on the same page as me? And I know that's not everybody, but it was really stark to me during the pandemic. I was worried that I would not be able to do this job forever, and I wasn't really sure what to call that. I had some trouble with a manager out there, and it just got so weird and crazy, and I ended up taking a leave. And during that time, the company had put me in touch with their sort of crisis people. And it wasn't long before somebody said, well, I think you're burned out, and I think we need to circle the wagons here and help you out. And I had actually not heard that term before, and I didn't recognize that was what was going on with me. And I had some great counseling. I was almost immediately matched up with a coach, a professional coach, which was super, super helpful, and started imagining what it would take to make it so I love doing what I was doing again, because I felt like it was something I was good at. I mean, when I have good interactions with patients, they always feel good. And a friend of mine who I went to medical school with, who works here in Cleveland, knew of my story and told somebody who told somebody who told somebody, who called me out of the blue and said, would you ever consider moving to Cleveland? Now, my memory is I think I chuckled and I said, sure, I'll get back to you. And I went home and I told my wife, and I thought she was going to just laugh. And I thought, well, that'll be the end of that. The Cleveland Clinic doesn't want me. But she said to me, did you talk? Maybe you should talk to them. And it was just such a prescient thing to do. It was such a good idea to just see what else is out there in the world. Our kids were older. They weren't really going to be at home anymore. Portland had gotten very expensive, especially in the neighborhood where we were living. And long story short, I mean, between the opportunities and then kind of the financial security of being in a company this size, plus the teaching that I'm supported in doing with time carved out of my schedule, we decided to make a break for it. The biggest downside was the patients that I had taken care of for 20 years. That was tough. I still have them write me like 3 years later, and they say, are you thinking of coming back? Or do you know anyone who could be my doctor in Portland? And that makes me, I regret that.
Sounds like one huge challenge, and the sort of cascade of financial issues and pressures of the business of medicine in the place you're practicing. Another thing that we really don't think about when we enter our careers.
Yeah.
And I would say, I hear a lot of courage in this too, the courage to actually try something new. What was that like for you?
Yeah, considering we're both in our 50s and going to make this change was incredibly anxiety provoking. I mean, many sleepless nights, lots of counseling, lots of pros and cons conversations, trying to understand what did it mean to move, what would it be like here, leaving friends, some family still in Portland. And I think we flew out here a couple of times to meet people and see houses and things like that. And I think when we finally, decided on an offer or agreed on an offer and decided to do this, it sort of went into automatic drive, and we just did everything we needed to do. We purged the house. We got everything boxed up that we were going to bring, got the mover truck, And I don't think it was till we were here that I fully sunk in that if this decision wasn't a good decision, it wasn't like we could just go back.
Right.
We'd sold the house and, pared down a whole bunch of stuff, and we were kind of showing up here and, untested what it would be like. And I'll tell you, just the kindness of people, our neighbors, patients, staff I work with, it soon felt very comfortable. And we look back, both my wife and I were talking about this, and it just feels like such a good decision to have come, professionally, personally. And I don't know if I would be doing this well if I were still where I was, because just the way, things had changed and how I was feeling. And I don't lie awake worrying about whether this was a bad decision or not.
No, on the contrary, it sounds like it really has worked out well, and I think that is not terribly common, but it's a great example to me of the fact that taking a step back, recalibrating, and looking for opportunities and having the courage to take some risks can pay off.
What's interesting is I never would consider myself a brave person. I don't feel like a risk taker. I don't feel like I would never jump out of an airplane, roller coasters freak me out kind of person. And it's so disproven by what we did. It's hard to reconcile that sometimes. I think that feeds into my own, my own imposter feelings sometimes. But, I've done this long enough to realize I wouldn't be here if there wasn't perceived value, from the company of me, and then just to sit back on our laurels and see where we've ended up after, nearly 3 years here, would say that no, we actually were, my wife and I were very brave to do this.
Exceptionally brave. I'm so intrigued to talk to you a little bit about developing this podcast series, and I think I've shared with you, I really appreciated the fact that the podcast series really follows many different explorations with individuals and their stories.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that really engages me to hear how people have navigated from other physicians to even some people outside of medicine.
Mm-hmm.
If you would, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you had the energy and the creativity to get this podcast off the ground. That also not an easy thing, I don't imagine.
During the time that I had taken off and I was learning all about burnout, I recognized that a lot of my friends and colleagues had probably similar experiences, and I wanted to explore that. And so I came up with a list of probably 15 questions and did little interviews with 22 people, mostly colleagues, people I knew from residency, other doctors. And I asked them the same questions and was able to string together sound bites that you'll hear in the pilot episode that felt, to me, it felt like a safe place where we could talk about stuff like this, and that it doesn't need to be a lecture. It doesn't need to be me saying, here, if you're burned out, do this, this, and this, and buy this book. And I don't think those resonated with me at all. And I didn't feel like there was a lot of places where I could listen to somebody talking to somebody of renown who, you know, might not feel as confident as they look, or has experienced their own burnout, or, you know, is aware that burnout's possible, so they've tried all these different things. And I've just been lucky enough to get to meet people like you and get introduced to other people who are very well respected, who are very interested in this. And so from the pilot to where we are now, I do have to admit there was a couple of years where I kind of put it down, but that was while I was trying to decide if we're going to move to Cleveland. Mm-hmm. Once we got out here, the clinic actually supports its own coaching program. They have a very well-established program, as you know, you're part of. And there was a 4-day seminar that I was able to sign up for. And during the seminar, we would break out into these little groups. And there would be 3 doctors and 2 preceptors. And unfortunately, it's all on Zoom, but this kind of worked. And over the period of 4 days, we would do coaching practice with each other while the people who were trained were watching us and giving us feedback or butting in if we were getting off track. And I talked about moving from Portland and burnout and all this stuff, and I was like, this is boring. I'm going to talk about something else. And just on a whim, I said, you know, I have this podcast, and I put together a pilot. And I don't know why I haven't done anything with it, but I feel like it's important. And I left that coaching session, that training coaching session, with this sudden eagerness, I guess, to do it. And along the way have just found that people are so giving with their time to record with me that it's been fun. It's not a chore. And the fact that, you know, I have no budget, you can do so much with the computer now and editing and stuff like that, that I think I make a product that I'm proud of. It'd be great if someday it was done more professionally, but it just came from because this person introduced me to that person who introduced me to that person who said you should interview that person.
And it's a fascinating story, really, of, I guess, sort of a plug for coaching, helping people maybe unlock there.
Yeah. As an aside, right, and as an aside to that piece, I would stress that that's the most amazing thing about coaching to me, is everything I walk away with I already knew, but I didn't know I knew it.
Things you've talked about with meaning from your patients and patients who still keep in touch from Portland and write to you, and I get a sense that really helping other people is super important to you, patients, but even colleagues and other professionals, to sort of talk about this burnout thing in a new way.
It does. It really does make me sad when I know that someone's struggling, you know, especially colleagues, because there aren't enough doctors and there aren't enough people as that. I feel like losing one of us in this field is a real problem. It's a real epidemic itself, and I have to be careful because, you know, my optimism or my outlook may not fit with everybody. And I've certainly run into that before, where my good intentions were not accepted and, you know, it rubs people the wrong way sometimes. So I try really hard with the podcast not to come off as saying I have figured it out. I have certainly not figured it out. I figured out what works for me, and I've talked to a bunch of people, and this is kind of some of the things that they've thought about.
It's not trying to give advice or tell people, it's trying to expose people maybe to some new ideas, new ways of looking at things, which is terrific. This idea of caring about other professionals, I also really admire that value you have, because I think most people would agree with the statement that they care about their fellow professionals. We've had some conversations previously, and I really get the sense You truly, you have a deep caring for your colleagues and really want them to experience a joy in the practice of medicine, and recognizing that everyone experiences it differently.
Well, I was thinking it circles back to what you said about my office. You said you walked in and it was a vibe and it was comfortable, and that's important to me because I want to be comfortable. I think we all spend a lot of time at work, and I think we work better as a team if we like each other. I don't mean we have to be best friends, but I think we can be cordial and understand if somebody's struggling, that we should help them. I think those are not inconsistent with being a good doctor. I know a lot of people are uptight about making friends at work, and I'm not saying that you need to spend your life with these people, but you kind of already spend your life with these people. So
Right.
the better the relationship there, I think the better off things are for you. I think it's better for the patients to know that they've got a cordial team. So I guess I just have always imagined a world in which we at work are kind of on the same wavelength about how things go. Certainly that's not to say that, people have different opinions about stuff. But I think we all want to see patients. I think we all want it to be more efficient. I think we all want freedom in our jobs. And I think that the friendships, or the work friendships, I guess, on top of it, it's just more, it's like icing on a cake.
Well, you said something important to me, I think. A couple of things. One is, it's not that you have to be best friends with people, but having a sense of teamwork and camaraderie, and even the patients see it. They like to be cared for, and they get a sense of when the health professionals in the office care for each other and enjoy being together. I think that's fantastic. I heard someone sent me an article about kindness, and they said it's not about being nice, it's really about helping people reach their potential, and sometimes that means having difficult conversations, but it's always being supportive of someone and trying to help them get to a better place. I think the physical environment, the welcoming environment that I sense coming into your practice certainly feels like a place that someone would be welcome and want to be.
It doesn't always work. Some people are not happy doing this, and I get it. Some people, no longer do it for the reasons they started, and that's sad. But
well, you can't control that, right? You can control sort of how you bring yourself, folks. But you're right. You can't control all of that.
But I would say one thing that I've learned in coaching is that although I can't control that, nor can I move the needle on a company this size, I absolutely have my own sphere of influence where I can make a difference and I can decide how to show up. And to me, that's been so powerful. It feels very important because it helps me understand that we are all different. We all have our own stories, but there's a place where I can make a difference. And that's important to me.
I love that. I'm aware that you've had an opportunity to get involved with some things outside of just seeing patients. I wonder if you can reflect on that and what that has meant to you in your professional role.
Sure. It's funny because my residency director told me that I was a jack of all trades and master of none, and I don't think he meant it in a nice way. Because there was a time during residency when we were like remodeling a house and doing other stuff, and I've been worried about that. I've been worried about not being good enough at my job while I have other interests in other areas. But those other interests are what keeps me going. I have weird and varied other hobbies that make no sense to anybody who hears about them. I find time for that stuff because it feeds my brain, it feeds my soul, and I think that's important. Part of what has worked for me is to have a lot of other things to do. Not so much that I'm busy all the time, but there's things that I can go do that bring me a lot of joy that are readily available in my own life.
You interviewed a professional who teaches
Oh, the songwriter, yeah.
songwriter and music, and so I know that's an important part of your life, and I think that so again, it's having that interest and things outside of your professional role can be so important. I was also thinking about the things within your professional role outside of seeing patients. I know you've gotten involved with some things here in a relatively short period of time, and my sense is that these have been some interesting explorations for people
Sure.
to think.
I think one of the things that excites me about being where I am now is the opportunities to do other things. So, for example, I'm involved with the medical school as an assistant professor and doing all the teaching that I'm doing.
I wonder if you could share with the audience with some of the tendencies you get in the grind or burnout.
Sure. I think I can share experiences that I've had that somebody at a residency level of training might have so much ambiguity about what they're going to do and what the future holds. I try to make a calm space. I try to tackle concerns, in a quiet manner, because a lot of times they're very charged. I mean, they're working too many hours and all that, and so they'll start talking about things that I know are kind of more on a personal level, and I like them to know that this is an okay place to do that. And we've had some pretty deep conversations about people that have nothing to do with their residency, that have everything to do with just life, and that has felt really good to be able to just even reassure somebody. The other place that I really like is that I don't know. A lot of the ones that I've worked with over time don't seem to have a lot of experience, practice, or desire to do physical exam. And I think physical exam is so great. And I love showing them things like, actually, you can hear a murmur. you can do things. You can feel a liver. You can, and I was just working with the medical student who I have on using a direct ophthalmoscope, which is not an easy task to learn at all. And I remember somebody sitting down and just really teaching me, and I felt really good paying that forward. Although I think I have a hole in my retina from where she was looking with the scope. And I don't know, it makes me feel like it makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing, like I'm in the right place. This is where I am here to help because that's what I can help doing.
Well, as someone obviously very involved with medical student education, I really appreciate your efforts. And what I would reflect is I think that when you create safe space, it's so important because there's so much of a trainee that feels vulnerable. It's very easy for trainees to feel invisible at times, and so making them feel valued is really, really important. Could you say something about what you get in return from that? What type of positive feedback and how that impacts you when you're working with trainees? And because I know you've shared some of that with me.
Yeah, I think it's I've gotten some really heartfelt cards from people, from trainees who told me that I was helpful at a really important time. That they come and say hi to me even if I'm not precepting them that day, which always feels good.
When to get something when you're having maybe a day that's not going great and you open up a card and it's a note of gratitude.
Oh man, yeah.
I mean, it's so, it makes you really feel like you're in the right place.
That's a really good feeling, because I think for a while, especially while I was kind of experiencing burnout, I didn't know if I was in the right place. I feel incredibly grateful that our mid-levels come and talk to me all the time about questions about stuff. How would I do something? I really love and value that too, because again, I guess it gets right back to feeling like I'm doing what I should be doing.
When you have those meaningful relationships, what I'm hearing is, people come to, there's a sense of trust, and people come and will reach out to you if they think you may be having a tougher day, and will seek out your advice. And I'm wondering, how do you experience that? I mean, what does that feel like for you?
At the time, I guess it kind of just happens a lot of the time, and then later I reflect on, wow, that person came to me because they trusted me, and that, I don't know, it feels, it helps to solidify my understanding that I'm right where I should be, and that I'm enough, and I'm doing it. And I think that I've spent so much of my life not feeling that way, that to feel that way at this point is really good stuff.
That's great. You were starting to mention some of the other projects and activities, and I think that I'd like to hear about that too.
There is a project that I was handed by our section head to schedule inbox coverage when physicians are out. And I found it to be a nearly impossible task to get right. There's so many moving parts, and there's, not everybody works full time, and people have different opinions about what is fair, and I just felt like there's got to be a better way. And so I was noodling on that with my brother, who's a computer programmer, and in his logical brain, he's like, well, why don't you just do this? And I said, well, I didn't know that was a thing. And so we invented a software solution, basically, that takes the duties that you're supposed to cover. So for us, there's sort of 4 major categories: phone calls, results, MyChart messages, and refills. And we've decided that those 4 things have to be done every day, whether a person's here or not. And you could say it's exactly for patient care. And he made it so that I could put in the days people work and different preferences about how hard each of the tasks are, and then make a running tally so that at the end of the year, basically everybody got the same amount of assignments, and that you can always see it. And then it puts it out on a nice calendar. Wow. And so with the support of the company, actually, I've really been able to take that far, and it's gotten a lot of support that I didn't think it would get, because I didn't think it had a very big audience. But people think that, perhaps it does have a bigger audience, because this is a problem. When an administrator makes a call schedule, doctors tend not to feel like it's fair or right. And I think to have something that's doing it along the lines of what a doctor thinks is how we should do that. And it's been really exciting to be able to do that in addition to doctoring. I think what fuels that too, though, is that I work in a place where that kind of stuff is recognized. And from that, I was invited to be Epic Builder, which allows me some kind of deeper knowledge into the way the EMR works, and how we can program it to do things that we don't have to wait for the entire institution to do. And stuff like that wouldn't have been something I would have known about.
And I'm going to make a wild guess that when you decided to move here and take this job, those types of things were not on your radar.
No.
I want to shift maybe, as we sort of come to some closure here. I'm going to guess that life is not always the way you would like it, even in a new practice environment, and it's been a positive move for you. Challenges that you see and things that you think are flaws in the practice, or things that are not fair, or something along those lines.
A couple things come to mind. My first day here, I was sitting here in this office, and one of the docs, who's no longer with this practice, came in and closed the door. And they had started just a few months before I did, and started just going off on a rant about all of the things that aren't right, and all of the things, and And I remember sitting there thinking, okay, if there was a time to decide whether or not this was a mistake, it's now. And I sort of held on to, I think, just experience with time is that things seem to work out. And they work out one way or another. And this will either get better or it won't. And I stuck to that because I really did want to make this work. And indeed, this person left and was just not a very happy individual. And I think that it's so easy to take that personally, or not personally, but absorb that energy and think, oh no, you're right, everything's terrible bad. But I gave myself space to experience this for myself and come up with my own opinions despite what that person was saying. So people tend to say really negative things sometimes at work about the system or about management. And I absolutely recognize there are lots of things that could go better. The perspective I have by coming here from somewhere else is that, every place has their pluses and minuses. And I think finding yourself in the place with more pluses than minuses can be hard, but it's what had worked for me.
What I'm hearing is there's sort of a pause. There's a reaction to that, but then a pause on your part to say, okay, I'm going to recognize that, but before I endorse that completely, I'm going to, especially early on, I'm going to try to experience things and give this some time, which seems like a sort of a healthy response.
And I definitely do that now too. Like if somebody comes in here, hair's on fire about something they heard or something that happened, I do try to get a bit of a lay of the land before I decide how I'm going to be about it. But I'm human. I get upset. I certainly get hurt feelings. If patients are mean or something, I have all of the regular reactions. I think I take comfort in the fact that I know that if I just give it some time, the things will be less acute, and I can have a different perspective on it later. I certainly don't mind talking to leadership and say, guys, this is going on here. What I found is that in an organization this big, what's helpful is if you're going to bring forward something is to have the solution attached because they don't have necessarily the time or bandwidth to hear every little, hangnail that you have that's, craw on your side, but to them there's, bigger issues.
And that takes a little bit of courage, right?
I guess it does. Yeah. I mean, it's worked for me so far.
Now, Steve, we've covered so many issues here today. I want to just thank you for taking the time, and I appreciate your honesty and your insights. You have not had a linear path.
Yeah.
Which is probably true for most folks. But you've taken different steps that were pretty big pivots, and that has been rewarding for you. It's led you to a better place. And thank you very much for the chance to spend some time with you today. It's really it's been a wonderful discussion from my end.
But I really appreciate it, and thanks for the time you spent with me today. If this episode resonated with you and you feel that this was helpful, please share it with a colleague. This is Dr. Stephen Sears, and you've been listening to Heal the Burn. Thank you.